Under the scorching Italian sun, imagine a magnificent stage. In the center of a blood-stained arena, tens of thousands of eyes are fixed on a single point. A lone man stands there, his mighty body towering to the sky, his perfectly sculpted muscles glistening with sweat. With a single, dramatic slash of his sword, he strikes down his opponent, sparking a roar of cheers that shake the stone walls of the Colosseum. This is the image of the gladiator that has been ingrained in our minds. The ancient superhero, a symbol of flawless masculinity, has been reproduced by Hollywood cinema for generations. Pop culture has convinced us that gladiators were physically flawless athletes who fought for absolute honor. However, history written in blood is often buried by fantasy. When we peel back the layers of romanticization and look directly at the archaeological evidence, the truth that emerges feels strange and perhaps disappointing to some. Real Roman gladiators, it turns out, didn't look like the heroes of modern movies. In 2008, a team of researchers from the Medical University of Vienna excavated near Ephesus, modern-day Turkey. They discovered a mass burial complex nearly 2,000 years old. Entombed within it were the remains of dozens of men legally identified as arena fighters, Roman gladiators. Scientists then performed advanced isotope analysis to determine what went into these fighters' bodies during their lifetime. The results stunned the academic world and instantly debunked Hollywood myths. These gladiators did not eat roast pork, lamb, or the high-protein diets that modern athletes consume to build muscle. Six-pack. Based on chemical traces in their bones, the greatest warriors of the ancient world were vegetarians. They were nicknamed barley fields, which literally means barley man. Their daily staples consisted of massive amounts of cheap carbohydrates, barley, whole wheat, and dried pea porridge. This menu wasn't driven by any concern for animal rights among the gladiator owners, but by cold business calculations. Gladiators were deliberately fattened. They required a thick layer of fat over their bodies. This fat wasn't a sign of unhealthy behavior, but rather a deliberate biological process. In the arena, this thick layer of fat served as a natural shield. When an opponent's sword struck their body, it would only tear through the fat layer, not sever major blood vessels or destroy vital organs. This strategy produced a visual effect that Roman audiences loved. Blood gushing dramatically, the wounds looking horrific, yet the gladiators still managed to stand and continue fighting. It was a bloody spectacle designed to last, a theater of bodily exploitation packaged as public entertainment. Let's take a moment to look at another part of the world during the same period. In the East, around 73 BC, China's Han Dynasty was at the height of its power. They were busy building a magnificent bureaucracy, strengthening the Silk Road, and refining their social order using Confucian teachings that emphasized morality, family honor, and the rule of law. Yet, at nearly the same time, in the heart of the Roman Empire, a civilization that claimed to be the most modern and civilized in the world treated humans as little more than mere livestock. They were fed cheap carbohydrates en masse, not for their health, but to make their bodies look beautiful and dramatic when slaughtered in front of a bloodthirsty public. The illusion of athleticism and honorable death is slowly crumbling. Beneath the architectural splendor of the Colosseum, inaugurated in 80 AD, the first reality we must face is a harsh truth. Gladiators never fought for their own glory. They were commodities fattened to satisfy the visual fantasies of a sick empire. If their bodies were shaped by a bizarre diet, then their souls were forged in the closest thing to hell on earth game, a gladiator school. However, don't imagine this place as a comfortable athlete training center. Game is a maximum security prison, a high-walled fortress where human freedom is completely stripped away, and every corner is watched by armed guards. At the top of the hierarchy of this place reigns a man named a trainer. In Roman law, a trainer has a very low social status, equivalent to a pimp. But within the walls of this school, he is a god who holds complete control over life and death. For the trainer, these fighters are not human, but rather walking investment assets that must be squeezed to produce piles of gold coins. How does one end up in this terrible place? History records 3 entrances that drag people into Rome's bloody industry. The first door is those who are called damned to the game, the heavy-handed criminals, rebels, and dissident slaves sentenced to fight in the arena. For them, entry into the gladiator school was a delayed death sentence. The second door was for the prisoners of war, foreign soldiers from the Gauls, Thracians, or Carthaginians who were captured alive and forced to fight to entertain the enemy who had destroyed their homeland. However, the third door is the most ironic and mysterious. They are called authority. They were not slaves, nor prisoners of war. They were free citizens of Rome, former soldiers, impoverished nobles, or commoners trapped in the stifling debt of ancient capitalism. Unable to pay their debts and facing starvation, they voluntarily stepped forward to trainer and sell the rest of their lives. Before setting foot on the training sands, these free men had to swear a terrible, extreme oath, known as Gladiators' oath. Under this oath, they declare, I am ready to be burned, tied up, beaten, and killed with iron dot. With that sentence, they legally relinquish the right to their own bodies, surrendering their dignity as free human beings for a piece of paper to survive. Inside game, their days are filled with merciless physical torture. Training runs from dawn to dusk, using wooden swords deliberately made heavier than real swords to accustom their muscles to the extreme stress. Broken bones, torn muscles, and severe bruises are commonplace. To combat this constant physical deterioration, Roman physicians employed a highly unusual ancient medical formula. After rigorous training, gladiators were required to drink a special concoction made from wood ash or bone ash dissolved in water. Through modern isotope analysis, scientists have uncovered the mystery behind this strange beverage. The disgusting concoction turned out to be a high-dose calcium supplement in its raw form, an ancient medical invention designed to speed the healing of broken bones, allowing the slave to return to training and fighting without wasting time. Let's shift our focus for a moment from the cruelty of Rome to the African continent in the 1st century AD. South of Egypt stood the prosperous Kush Empire in ancient Nubia. There, civilization was ruled by a dynasty of powerful warrior queens, known as the Kandake. One of their famous queens, Amanirenas, led her troops directly to the front lines, taking up arms against Roman expansion in defense of her homeland's sovereignty, honor, and independence. The contrast is both remarkable and bitter. While other nations around the world fought with weapons to defend their dignity and independence, in the heart of the Roman Empire, free men lined up in front of the schools of death. They willingly submitted to chains, whippings, and ash drinking, begging to become slaves in the arena simply to escape the shackles of poverty in this supposedly most civilized cosmopolitan world. When a gladiator is able to survive the hell of training in-game and scoring victory after victory under the scorching heat of the arena, an absurd transformation occurred. In an instant, their status was turned upside down. In the eyes of Roman law, they remained the dregs of society, a group infamy who have no civil rights, on par with prostitutes and actors. But on the city streets, they are superstar. They were money machines, sex symbols, and the center of the pop culture craze of ancient Rome. The popularity of these fighters spread like a plague across the city walls. In the ruins of Pompeii, we can still read ancient graffiti carved by fanatic fans. One inscription reads, Celadus the Thrax makes the girls sigh. Portraits of victorious gladiators were carved into oil lamps, drinking cups, and even floor mosaics in the mansions of the elite. Young children in Rome no longer played soldiers. They role-played as their idol gladiators in the open fields. This is where ancient Roman capitalism began to show its most depraved and disgusting side. The empire realized that gladiator bodies were not mere spectacles, but rather raw commodities to be squeezed to the last drop. Thus, a gladiator-based souvenir and cosmetics industry was born. The blood of a gladiator killed in the arena was highly prized. Roman healers and shamans convinced the public that the fresh blood flowing from the neck of a formidable fighter possessed magical properties. This blood was purchased at high prices, then consumed as a cure for epilepsy, or mixed into special potions to increase fertility for couples desiring children. However, the madness didn't stop with blood. A much more bizarre, high-end beauty product emerged: gladiator sweat and bodily excrement. After grueling fights or training, the olive oil rubbed onto gladiators' bodies mixed with their sweat, arena dust, and dead skin cells. This thick liquid was then scraped from their skin using a curved iron tool called a strigil. This disgusting, corrosive liquid wasn't thrown away. Roman entrepreneurs collected it, bottled it in fancy little glass bottles, and sold it on the cosmetics market. Noble women, including the wives of wealthy senators, were willing to pay a fortune for these tiny bottles. They applied the slaves' sweat to their faces as night creams, beauty masks, and even made it into erotic perfumes to arouse their passions in bed. Let's shift our focus for a moment to another part of the world, specifically to the Western Hemisphere around the 2nd century AD. In Mexico's Central Valley, the Maya civilization and the ancient people of Teotihuacan were at the peak of their operational prowess. They were building the magnificent and structurally sound Pyramid of the Sun. There, human sacrifice was also widespread, but its purpose was purely religious, spilling blood on the altar to maintain the balance of nature and appease the gods, ensuring the sun would rise the next day. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Roman Empire, the concept of human sacrifice had shifted completely from a sacred ritual to a profane commercial commodity. Human lives and bodies were no longer sacrificed to the gods in the sky, but instead exploited to satisfy sexual desires, beauty obsessions, and a pop culture entertainment industry that generated millions of sestertius coins. A bitter paradox. These humans were worshipped as gods in public spaces, yet their essence remained treated as little more than cosmetic ingredients to be bought and traded. As the bronze horn sounded and the war drums echoed throughout the arena, tens of thousands of spectators rose to their feet, demanding a brutal and merciless spectacle of slaughter. It's at this point that pop culture myths deceive us once again. We are led to believe that as soon as the underground gates open, two men will charge at each other, fighting in a chaotic mass brawl until one of them dies in a pool of blood. However, the historical reality behind the sands of the arena is much colder, more calculating, and full of business manipulation. Gladiator combat was no ordinary butchery. It was a massive, highly organized entertainment industry governed by strict laws and controlled by a hidden syndicate. Right in the middle of the Colosseum sand, walking between two fighters swinging sharp weapons, stood a middle-aged man wearing a white toga with red stripes. In his hand, he held a long wooden staff. This man is the Sum of the Raw, the main professional referee of the Roman arena. Presents the Sum of the Rowand, his assistants were not merely for show. Their job was crucial, ensuring that the rules of the game were followed. Gladiators did not fight randomly. They were divided into specific classes, specifically designed to create tactical balance. Net dash. Keeper armed with a net and a trident without head protection must fight against follower who wore heavy iron helmets and carried large shields. The referee was there to ensure there was no cheating, to stop the fight if their weapons got stuck, and most importantly, to prevent unnecessary premature deaths. Why should death be prevented in an arena designed to kill? The answer is money. The cost of training a top-tier gladiator is extremely high. Trainer had to invest years to feed them, take care of their medical care, and train them in fighting techniques. When a political official or emperor acted as editor, the party that organized and funded the event, they actually just rented the gladiators from trainer. This is where the behind-the-scenes business contracts come into play. If the fight is fair and a gladiator dies, the editor obliged to pay compensation, which can be as much as 50 times the normal rental price to the owner. Trainer. The loss of a single talented gladiator could instantly bankrupt the event organizers. Therefore, the secret syndicate behind the arena often arranges or sets up. Many big fights are designed to end in a draw. Standing scent. Both fighters were released with a draw, with neither man losing his life. The referee would give a hidden signal, stopping the duel when both gladiators had successfully presented a highly bloody, dramatic, and visually satisfying choreography. These fighters' lives were spared, not out of humanity or compassion, but rather out of a calculation of the economic balance of capital too valuable to allow to die foolishly. Let's shift our attention for a moment to another part of the world during the same period. Around 248 AD, while the Roman Empire was celebrating its city's 1000th anniversary by slaughtering thousands of exotic animals and staging hundreds of elaborate gladiatorial fights in the Colosseum, to the east, the Sasanian Empire of Persia was under the rule of King Shapur the Great. While Rome was busy distracting itself from domestic issues, inflation, and political crises by providing its people with staged entertainment, King Shapur was busy on the real battlefield. He effectively destroyed a Roman legion, captured Emperor Valerian alive, and carved a massive stone monument at Nakshi Rostam to celebrate his absolute military glory. This geopolitical contrast exposes a harsh truth about the end of Rome's glory. Beyond its borders, its real enemies were preparing to bring down the empire. But within the walls of the Colosseum, the Roman public chose to remain lulled by the illusion of false heroism, guided by the tap of a referee's stick. A dystopian theater where the bloodshed was real, but the outcome was determined by behind-the-table financial deals. While business calculations and referee manipulation often stalled for time, the sands of the Colosseum ultimately remained the end of the road. There came a time when the drama had to end, when the wings of death could no longer be negotiated with gold coins. Real death would come knocking when the audience's tolerance limit was reached, or when a gladiator made the most fatal mistake in the industry, fighting a coward. When a gladiator falls to his knees, his weapon loose, and the tip of his opponent's sword pressed against his chest, the entire arena will suddenly fall silent. Thousands of eyes will turn from the bloody sand to the seats of honor, where the gladiator will be dot editora, the seated emperor. This is where the greatest myth in ancient Roman history is most often misunderstood by the modern world. For centuries, we were convinced that a thumbs down gesture was a command to execute, while a thumbs up meant pardon. However, historians have corrected this widespread misconception with the phrase thumbs down, or twirling thumbs. The historical truth is actually the opposite and far more terrifying. When the audience and the emperor pointed their thumbs upward, sideways, or extended from their fists, it was a visualization of a drawn sword. The gesture was an absolute command: stab his neck. On the other hand, if they wanted the gladiator to be spared, they would hide their thumbs inside their fists or point them downwards towards the ground. This thumbs down gesture literally means, put down your sword, let him live. However, if the general decision that day was death, a chilling final ritual had to be performed immediately. The defeated gladiator must not cry, beg, or show any flicker of fear in his eyes. He must kneel on the sand, grip the victor's thighs, and crane his neck in resignation. The victor would then plunge his sword downward, piercing the collarbone directly through the heart or stabbing through the throat. Facing death with absolute composure, without flinching, was the only supreme dignity left to a slave. In his final moments, he proved that while the audience could possess his body, they could not possess his soul. As time passed, the wheels of history continued to turn, slowly crushing this bloody industry. Entering the early 5th century AD, the gladiator's pulse began to wane. The introduction of Christianity as the official religion of the empire ushered in a new wave of morality that opposed the slaughter of humans for entertainment. At the same time, the Western Roman Empire was in economic decline. It was plagued by severe bankruptcy, runaway inflation, and festering corruption. In 404 AD, Emperor Honorius officially issued a decree closing gladiatorial schools and banning arena fighting forever. Rome no longer had the money to finance its theaters of death. Today, the Colosseum stands silently as a giant, empty stone monument. The dark side of the gladiators' lives teaches us one fundamental lesson. They were not the superheroes glorified in fiction, but rather the victims of a dystopian system of the most extreme kind. Beneath the architectural splendor and military glory of ancient civilization, the Roman Empire left a dark historical legacy. A time in which human lives were manipulated by restrictive diets, exploited by entertainment capitalism, and sacrificed for the politics of diversion known as bread and the Circassians. Feed them, give them entertainment, then they will forget about freedom.